Hello and welcome to episode 42 Property Mastermind podcast with Hilary Saxton. This week's special guest, Bob Andersen, pretty much the usual guest, but occasionally we have other ones. But today we're talking about how the council can affect your property development. This will be a fabulous episode. We'll be covering so much interesting stuff. You're going to want to tune in. So let's jump inside to episode 42. Hello, and again, welcome to episode 42, How the Council Can Affect Your Property Development. Hilary Saxton talking to Bob Andersen. But before we get started, the usual story, giving away a copy of the book, Secrets of Property Millionaires Exposed, and all the different people who have strategies around how they think or how they like to make money from property. It is a fabulous read. If you would like to win a copy of this, you are welcome to send me a text, email, comment favourably on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts. Give us a raving review, share us with your friends, show that. Pop it on Instagram, however you can promote us or share us, then you will go in the draw to win. This week, this copy goes to Jerome Hensey. Jerome stepped up from our Property Mastermind online course to the bundle. Thanks, Jerome. You will be receiving this in the post in the next few days. So let's jump into episode 42. We are ploughing through.
We are, 42. It seems like yesterday.
I wish I was 42.
No, I wasn't going to say that. You're pretty pumped today, I've noticed, just, leading on.
I'm a bit fired.
You had a big session with your coach.
I did. I had a fab session with my coach this morning, working with a new coach. And she's American, and she is a machine, and she's doing some great stuff for my head. And I'm just really noticing... I'm noticing a lot. She's a high performance coach. I believe in coaching because I am a coach, and I think I might have said earlier that I'm having a coach all year this year, just to really fire off and knock off some amazing stuff.
Seems to be working.
Oh my God, yeah, she's so good. She's so good for me, and I believe in coaching. So, and people listening, I know a lot of people. Well, we've got a lot of people that work in our community, are a part of us, and we coach them, mentor them.
Yeah. You never want to think, I know it all. I'm right now. Don't need to improve.
Actually, that's probably we've got a new level of coaching type thing coming. We're offering soon.
Yeah, well, that'll be coming out. The nuts and the bolts around that will be coming out. Probably in about a month or so, I guess.
Maybe,
maybe
probably.
a little bit longer.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, so we've looked for something between what is our standard courses and our mentoring program, which is a high level program. Something that in between, I guess, where people could certainly get the education, but get a lot of if you like, a lot of excitement, a lot of stuff happening, and also some help. A bit of extra help that,
because Bob and I it's only Bob and I. We don't outsource to last year's students, us doing the work, and we're capped and we have a bit of a waiting list. So it's kind of an in-between thing, how we can help more people and grow. So if you want to know anything, you're welcome to reach out or get on a waiting list. We know it'll sell out. We'll probably cap it at 20 people.
Yeah, definitely tops 20 on that. And it will go fast.
And it'll run for 6 months.
It's exciting.
It is really exciting.
It's taken a while for us to get our heads together and actually build it and come up with something pretty incredible. We've gone back to a lot of our past students and our current, even our mentoring students in some cases, just to find that slot in between, like the course and the mentoring program. Looking forward to that.
It is, and we've got a lot going on. Our website's going to undergo a little bit of a change over the next few weeks, but do check us out, propertymastermind.com.au, because we've got some pretty cool events coming up, as in live events where we'll be hitting Brisbane in May.
Yeah.
And ours will be next level. Nothing you've ever seen. Pretty cool. Definitely want to come along to that one.
For sure.
And we'll be on our way to Sydney maybe. In fact, somebody yesterday from Victoria, when they found out, said they were flying up. I think I read that email.
Oh, they should.
They should. How good's that?
Why wouldn't you?
Exactly. But anyway, Bob, we've digressed. Oh, before we do that, can I ask you?
Can we digress some more?
Yeah. You just brought up the fact that I'm pumped. I've had my session with my coach this morning. Can I ask, and I know we're off piste as usual, we've started off completely unscripted, but I know in the early days you had a mentor, you had coaching and mentoring sort of but through somebody who... How do you go on that?
Well, I work with a couple of the top development companies in Australia. And so, I mean, you learn a lot in-house there, and they teacher and you're working with other high-level people. But I did have a mentor.
Yes.
Warren Lennon was his name. Sadly, he's not around anymore. Who basically took me under his wing. I was quite young. In my role in some of the major development companies, I was like 20 years younger than what you would normally be to have that high-level role. It's a state management role in the biggest development companies in Australia, and he saw something in me that maybe a lot of people wouldn't, and he actually gave me the job against others who, on the surface had a lot more experience. But he saw something in me. He said, anyway, it's a long story. I won't go into it now, but that was Warren, and didn't just like hold my hand. He was a mentor. He's like, I often call him my property father. Now I had a normal father. Warren was my property father. Yes, that had a big influence on me.
That's cool. That's such a cool thing to know that we all need somebody who knows what they're doing, who can support us, and it's like having a personal cheerleader. That's what I equate it to. Yeah, but anyway, this is not our topic.
No.
Our topic.
What is it?
Hey, I don't know if you can hear a little jingling. It's the dog in the background scratching herself. I don't know. Can you hear a little jingle?
It's
Anyway,
got a little tag on a collar that jingles. Anyway, on with it.
On with it. We are talking about, and it is such an interesting topic. Before we do, I'm sorry, one more digression. How good was last week? We've had so many emails and texts
on the Overland Flow.
On Overland Flow. So if you didn't check it out, it got a massive rap. It's had so many people interested. So check out 41 on Overland Flow.
Yeah,
people loved it.
I just can't predict what people are going to be interested in.
Who knows? But anyway, this one promises to be just as good.
I wouldn't have thought so, but it has.
Yeah, I know. So how can councils affect your property development? And I suppose, Bob, we could probably start that off with when do you need a council involved in a property development?
Well, that's a good point, I guess. If you're just building a house, for instance, on a block of land, it's not considered a development applicable type of thing. So really all you need to do is you get your plans and a private certifier will certify them and you're away. It's when you do multiples, what we call multiple units, and that could be something as simple as a duplex or a two-lot subdivision or anything larger. That's when we need a council permit, if you like, or a development permit or council permission, call it what you like, when we're, basically anything over a house, upwards. Yeah, so there are, as you know, there's planning schemes, and every council has its own planning scheme around that. And there's often a thing called a table of development, where they set out in any particular zoning what you can do. With permissible uses, you're allowed to do it without the council, and then there's uses where you have to get council permission, and they'll also have a list of things you can't do.
Bob, are all websites even, I know, are all councils easy to find that information, or is it more of a conversation, or is it that more of a town planner's role?
Well, most councils these days have their planning scheme online, but it's a bit of a thing to actually read it. So, I mean, you could get just a private town planner to decipher it for you in simple English. So, yeah, I mean, what I'm saying is, other than a house, we've got to deal with council. Like it or not, that's what we've got to do. Okay,
so, and what can you do with the permissions, or what do you do with those permissions from council?
Well, if let's say it's permittable use, let's say the zoning says we can do townhouses if we get permission, if we get a permit and we lodge it. There can be different levels of assessment. It's called different things in different places. Some people might call it code assessable or impact. What that means is it's the level of compliance you have to go to. There's sometimes, although you have to get a permit, you don't have to advertise it publicly, and it doesn't, those sorts of things, and it can be a bit faster.
So all of those levels of assessment will state what the requirements are, I'm assuming. So what determines which has different levels? Is that just council?
Yeah, it's in their planning scheme. It's in their table of development. If ever you're confused, I mean, here's a tip, I suppose, if you want one. My suggestion is don't sit down and read a planning scheme, because it really it does your head in.
It's like reading a phone book.
Yeah, just have a chat to a private town planner, even if you have to buy a little bit of their time. To decipher the whole thing for you, where it is that you want to develop, simple English terms. And
There we
you'll
go.
be
Tip
fine.
number 1 for the day. I think people enjoyed the tips last week as well. We gave out about 3 or 4 and I pointed them out. So
Yeah.
there's a great tip from Bob. So I know that councils can have both a positive and negative impact on your property development. Bob, should we go down that road and explain some of those?
Yeah.
Let's go down a positive road before we have a negative one, because there aren't that
Well,
many positives, but they are there.
I mean, just in a straightforward sense, if you lodge an application with council, positive would have to be getting an approval,
Yeah.
because that's what you want to achieve, and the approval that you want.
Yes.
Like, for instance, you don't want to apply for, let's say, a 4 townhouse development, but get an approval for 3, because you probably bought the site expecting to get 4. So an approval isn't necessarily a great thing. When I'll qualify it by saying the approval that you want. And so that's a positive thing. An approval that's not positive might be an approval that you don't want, that doesn't quite
Plus
work
you've done
for
all
you.
your feasibility and all your numbers
Yeah,
on, say, on that example, the 4-pack, and then
Yeah.
getting back, no, it's 3.
Well, on the way through. I mean, the negative is obviously not getting an approval. And that's not what you want. That's not to say it's the end of the road.
No, well, we've got a great example actually of a couple we're working with who were rejected by council. Just that, I think, wasn't it to do with like setbacks and stuff? Was their issue?
It never quite got to the point where the application was knocked back, but council, or at least the council officer that was assessing it, and it can come down to personalities, as it did in this case. I remember the council officer just had a particular way that they wanted to go, and it was ridiculous.
And you know what, I wonder, Bob, if sometimes that's ego-based, and I've had
Sure
that
it is.
experience this week working with somebody trying to do something outside of, to do with what we do, trying to book something, and I bumped up against somebody's ego, and they decided something, and it was ridiculous.
Yeah,
And I suppose that's the same
to
with
the
this
point that
council
the
officer.
communication totally broke down from
Ridiculous.
their end.
Oh, just childish.
Yeah. So in this case, they wanted 4 townhouses. The council officer was pushing for 3. They wanted to do 3 levels on a couple. They were pushing for 2 levels. And at one point, the council officer said, "Look, if you want this to work, what you have to do is to buy the neighbour's property."
And they went and asked, and the neighbour's like, I don't want to sell my
Of course
property.
he doesn't want to sell his property.
What a statement from council.
And this thing was dug down to the point where they were going to have to head off to, well, in
VCAT.
this case it's VCAT in Victoria.
Yep.
Other states it might be the Land Environment Court. And so they were just pushing to get a knockback from council so that they could pursue it. But there's a bit more to that story, as you know.
Luckily, that council officer left, wasn't it? And
I think they might have been moved
sideways
to another
department,
area.
like the cleaning, hopefully.
Yeah.
And then the new council officer approved it, and it is now going ahead, which is
It's almost fully approved. So the arguments that the other council officer was pushing for, the other one isn't. So there's a situation, same council, same planning scheme, around the same time, and 2 different attitudes between 2 assessment officers at the council.
And I suppose the bonus side of that, and probably the positive side, if we were looking at that, was that there's been such an increase in property prices that they now have a more profitable development, and that will happen.
Yeah, and that's a market-driven thing, but it's turned out to be a bonus. It's been a bonus for a lot of people, really, but
It has.
who haven't bought good sites initially. But it looks like that one's going to be okay now. So they're avoiding the cost of having to go to VCAT to have it, to have it assessed by VCAT. VCAT, for those that don't know, in Victoria is basically where you go if you get a knockback and you want to get it reversed.
But it can take a long time. The process can be time. What does it cost, Bob, to go to VCAT?
It depends on the scale of the project, but like it can cost anything from like 5 to 10,000 to 20 on a not big project. But the waiting list is somewhere around 9 months.
Oh gosh.
So
and then depending on the piece of land you're sitting on, these guys were sitting on a vacant piece of land, so there's no rent or anything coming in, which is a little bit.
No. The house they bought on the site was so
unlivable.
dilapidated they actually demolished it. But there's an effect the council has had that was looking not good at all. I think it would have gotten rolled in VCAT personally.
They would have got it.
I think they would have won, but they would have wasted money in 9 months. So within council, the effect has changed due to a staffing effect.
What are other causes, Bob? We've got staffing. What are other causes of council, and I think egos as well? Seriously.
I had that on one of mine, talking about council staff. I was doing a substantial project. It was 22 apartments. There was only one place that we could bring the driveway in, and there happened to be this funny old little shanty-looking thing there. But at the time, there was, within council, you couldn't demolish anything that was built before 1901 at the time. That date's now moved forward to 1911. But the thing is, had no architectural significance. You know, it had lattice work from the 70s. It had this from the 60s. It had something else from the 50s.
Eclectic.
Just a mess. There was nothing original almost. And we needed to get it demolished. But the problem is we're up against the council officer. He said, well, you can't prove it was built before after 1901. And I said, well, you can't prove it was built before 1901. And so we had a heritage architect. They had a heritage architect. We got an historian to analyse the titles. And in the end, we couldn't prove it wasn't built after. They couldn't prove it wasn't built before. And then there's this loggerhead. A loggerhead of egos.
How long, Bob? How long was that?
Probably 3 months at that point.
Yes.
And then you got two quite expensive heritage architects headbutting each other as well. You know, the council are paying for one, but that's the ratepayers paying there, and I'm paying for the other one out of my own money. And the council officer went on a month's holiday. Fortunately, somebody else picked up that file.
Great story, yes.
I then went and had a talk to that person and said, look, how ridiculous the whole thing was. They actually agreed, and they said, if you can get a structural engineer certificate to say that the thing is dangerous and should be demolished, he said, I'll actually back the demolition. I got one the next morning, got it to the council officer, and demolished it the day after.
Yeah, Bob Andersen does not muck around.
Well, I couldn't. I didn't want this guy to come back from holidays.
Yeah, I got what. So, that's two outcomes that we've shown that have come out. Have had an outcome of positive, even though
through staff changes.
Yes,
that's how sensitive it can be. It's not just policy.
I know we've decided to talk on make a podcast of the big council deal you had to deal with.
That one, yeah.
But you've had, we'll just allude a little bit to there, you had a massive fight with council. And I think Bob alluded to something that a lot of people don't realise is that council doesn't care because they're using ratepayers' money. And the person disputing, which standing up for themselves in some cases, which is the reality, is paying for it out of their own pocket. And that's where it becomes ridiculous. So you actually had a massive fight with council. Do you want to go down that road?
I might even do a podcast on it. It's interestingly enough. But this particular one was a substantial project, so end value of around $55 million. Council had a last-minute change of heart, having worked with us for a year, and everything looked good. Just before it was due to be approved, about 5 days before, they swung around and said, we're not approving it. We didn't believe they had any town planning grounds for doing that, but they did anyway, and so I had to take them to the Land and Environment Court. There was a lot between. Then I got an expedited hearing, which is supposed to be a faster hearing, and that took 13 months. I spent $1 million of my own money fighting that case, and won.
But they were just dining out on taxpayers' money, and at the end of the day, the lady who said no, and the people, they just got fired.
Well, yeah, the head planner got fired at the end of that, and the second head planner conveniently retired, or resigned, I should say.
But that was
at the same time. Yeah, but really they were only pawns.
Yeah.
The real power came from the elected members in that case, from the mayor down, and they were just casualties. They were collateral damage, though the actual permanent employees, because at the end of the day they've got to do what the hierarchy says.
Muppets. Yeah.
Can
I say that's a bit rude?
Well,
but
you just did.
Puppets.
Puppets or Muppets.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's an example of council having a big effect fortunately, it was a big enough project that could absorb that $1 million, because you never get it back. It's not like a civil action when you go to court like that against a council approval. The money just disappears.
And at the end of the day, your gut feeling on that was it was personal. They'd sort of land tagged it for somebody else.
Yeah.
A relation.
Yeah, well, look, there's all sorts of things go on in the background that you find out later on. But anyway, the point is I had to fight it.
And you won it. So that will be it's a very interesting story, and I think we should share that. But so what are other reasons, Bob, apart from egos and because that's where we've gone so far, but there are other reasons that there are policy changes or planning scheme changes that will impact your property development. So what are they?
Yeah, so we've had a bit of a chat about even something as simple as staff or staff changes or staff's egos within council can have an effect on your development. But yeah, policy changes, I mean, they can be good or bad.
Yes. Give me a good one. What's been a good one?
Well, let's say you have a parcel of land that's zoned for doing 2-storey townhouses, and council zone it up that you can do a 5-storey apartment block.
How good.
And that's exactly what happened in parts of Brisbane, where I was doing quite a bit of development around 2014. 2014? Yeah, it would have been around then. They changed the Brisbane City Plan from the old one, which had been around for 14 years. And they made certain areas, they simply, if you like, upgraded or upzoned it from 2 levels to 5 in about 3 different parts of the city. And that obviously makes the value of land jump up a lot. But if you happen to either, if you knew it was coming and you bought, or you happen to own something that was there, 1 minute you got an 800 square metre site that's a potential 4 townhouse site, and next minute you can do a 5-storey apartment block on it. So that's and needless to say, pricing, the values jumped up immediately and continued to do that. So
what about, I know of another one when they changed in a particular council, they changed the car parking allocations, and that has a massive impact on what you can put on. So it just changes yield, and it just changes a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, you're right, absolutely, particularly yield, as you said. I'm thinking of one place where, with townhouses, you only needed 1 car park. Now, as you go around the country, I mean, there's, 500 or 600 councils in Australia, and they've all got their own rules. In some councils, if you have a 3-bedroom townhouse, you have to have a double, 2-car accommodation. In some councils, 3-bedroom townhouse, you only need 1 car accommodation. I've actually seen it in some where you need 1.5 cars accommodation.
Where do you put the other half of your car, Bob?
Well, you don't build 1.5 garages.
No.
If you did 4, 2 would have a single and 2 would have to have a double.
Ah, is that how they work? Okay.
Yeah. Half a garage isn't much good for anybody. But so, although the retirement village I'm doing, the garaging is a double and a half, and the half is for the golf buggy.
Carts. Yeah.
2 cars plus a golf cart. But anyway, getting back to it, that can have a massive effect, because that could be a situation where you might get 4 townhouses with a single garage and only 3 with a double. And when that policy came in, I mean, you could actually get caught in the middle there. You might buy a site that you think is good for 4 townhouses with a single garage, and then in the meantime, council could change it, and all of a sudden you can't get 4, you can only get 3. They might be bigger and with a double garage, and therefore you can sell them for more, but you still might not be able to make up the gap between the 4 and the 3. And that's a change, that car parking. That I'm thinking of one council that changed it twice in 2 years.
Who decides on these changes? They just
internal.
wake up one morning and say, let's have a change? What goes on there?
Oh, well, it's council policy. I'm sure there's people in there that sit around having discussions all day in their town planning area about, it could. Well, I mean, I can understand some of the reasoning. If you've got 3, particularly in some areas, like I'm thinking of, let's say somewhere, and I'm thinking of near a university, where you've got a 3-bedroom townhouse and a single car park, yet you've got 3 students in there and they each have a car. So you've got 1 car in the garage and 2 on the street.
Yeah.
Now, when you drive up those streets, and I've driven around them near the university, it's just both sides of the streets just chockers with cars because there's not enough parking. And in fact, you could even do a 4-bedroom townhouse with 1, and I've built heaps of them, 4-bedroom townhouses back in the day when you only needed 1 car park. And I built them near hospitals because 4 nurses love to rent them, or near, say, unis where 4 students. And so you got 1 car in the garage and 3 on the street. And I can see that that's a problem, particularly with people that live there, owner-occupiers, maybe on houses, and, their friends have to park 2 blocks away or whatever when they visit. But so that's,
and just a
that's
security
part of
thing,
the pressure.
Having to park down the road and then walk to your house at night. There's obviously that security.
I'm trying to look at the other side.
Yeah, yes.
From why that policy might go that way.
Yeah.
And I think that's some of the reasoning behind it. But that's an example of how a policy change could adversely affect you.
You mentioned earlier, Bob, about you might already own that piece of land and there's a change. How can somebody become aware or find out prior? You said if you knew prior, how would you find out prior what was going on with policy schemes, with what the council's got coming up?
Look, sometimes council, and they can do it, they'll just come out of the blue and do something. But these days, councils are a bit more consultative. Is that consultative? Whatever the right word is.
Sounds good to me, Bob.
And
you're a smart man.
Particularly in some issues where they like to get public comment.
Right.
So what they'll do, they'll propose a change, and then there'll be a certain amount of time where people can go to a council will set up little, community consultations, and their town planners will be there to explain the proposed change. People can come and listen. People can offer feedback on it and opinions on it, and council will supposedly take that into account, the feedback, and then they'll eventually form a policy. So there is you can see what's coming, probably, but it doesn't have to be that way. I can remember one in...
What is this, that one where you and Luke had that town hall thing? The whole town was against you or something.
I could do a podcast on that one.
Well, we'll save it then. It's a good story.
Yeah, that was a funny night. But like in Victoria, I remember a few years ago, they suddenly brought in this minimum garden area.
That's right, with 35...
25 to 35% of your site had to be garden all of a sudden.
Is it still standard or is it just parts
it's still there, best of my knowledge. But I think if it's lots over 400 square metres, you had to have 25%, and then sort of 600, I can't remember, it was 35, and it went up between 25 and 35% of your site. And go, that all of a sudden, that knocked the yield around. Because I knew somebody who was putting through a 5 townhouse project, and as soon as that garden thing came out, it just knocked it back to 4. The council said, no, it's not going to conform, redesign it, and they lost a townhouse off it. Yet they bought it as a 5 townhouse site and spent money getting the plans drawn up. Now they're going to get money getting a different set of plans drawn up, and they've just dropped a townhouse.
Property developing, it's not a game for the a game for the weak.
No,
you've got to be committed.
Had the market gone up in the meantime,
they'll survive.
Could absorb it. But what if the market was flat and wasn't going up in the meantime? All of a sudden you got like a marginal deal that might have dropped from 21 to 16%. Then you got. You're probably going to have to throw in some more equity, more than you thought you were going to do to get the finance. These things happen. I
think it's great that you bring that up, Bob, because at the moment with the price increase, people do see or think, property developing and property developers make a lot of money. But when the market is flat, something that small is critical.
Absolutely critical. Can have a big effect.
Yeah.
And it's a council policy change that can come in totally out of left field. So I've got my own opinion on councils, but particularly after my big punch-up recently. Yeah,
after the war.
Oh, it's a little while ago now, but anyway.
It still carries a few wounds. While we're on councils, I have actually heard stories, Bob, of even elected council members getting involved in developments. And this is a good tip, really. It's a bit of a tip.
Well, it is. So we're not just talking about the planning staff at the council who are permanent employees. We're talking about the elected members who can come and go. I mean, they could be there for, 3-year term and then gone, who knows. And look, what happens in most councils, when you lodge an application with council, it goes to the assessment manager who's in charge of that. But then there'll be other permanent employees in council who'll have input. The council engineer, the council, perhaps a landscaped architect within there, different professionals within council. But then the elected member for that area also gets a copy of it, because most councils, the deal is that any applications within an elected member's area, they get notified of the application. And to varying degrees, they can have some effect. Now, really, well, I can understand why, because you see, the elected members, all they think about is votes.
Yeah.
Their whole life is just about votes. They don't necessarily care about a development. But if something could be a little bit sensitive in an area that could cost them votes, they'll go against it, not on its merits, but on the votes. And sometimes the votes are the noisy minority, of course.
Yeah, the squeaky wheel gets oiled.
Yeah, and that can happen. And I'm thinking of one area. It's a couple of suburbs. It's one of those suburbs that I mentioned earlier that went from two levels to 5 levels. The local member is just absolutely anti every application. Every application in that couple of suburbs that goes in, she says, no, I don't want it, and it's the same old reasons.
The votes.
Yeah. Now, most people in council have sort of worked out that she's a professional objector, even though she has a certain amount of sway, and you pretty well can work around that. But I have seen circumstances where they can have too much sway, and can actually. I got involved in another war. It seems like I like to have a few blues and a few punch-ups from time to time, but
he's the most passive person in the world. But I think sometimes when you're property developing, the developers get a bit of a bad rap, and the council is not always pro.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sensibly passive, but I'll reach a point, right?
Yes.
To turn into a murderer? No, not really, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
I'll
you'll hold your ground.
I'll go so far
if you know it's
well, of
right.
course, I'll hold my ground, but
Yeah.
I mean, like, take me too far, and you don't go there. But
he's a scorpion.
In this
scorpion burst sign for anyone.
In this particular,
he's got a
case,
sting on his tail.
Yeah. So this is like nearly 30 years ago. Myself and another guy, not working together but separately, started doing lots of small, almost like little 1-bedroom units. They're about 30 square metres. And what we found is that on a normal site that would take 5 normal-sized 2-bedders, like 80 square metres, we could get like 14 of these little 1-bedders in there. And there was a real market for it because of the number of single-person households, yet nobody was developing it. And so it was a little niche that we jumped on. And anyway, having done a few ourselves, each of us, council started to get wind of it.
And decide they're not making enough money.
And it's... well, it happened to be at a time when there was council elections, and the whole platform of this particular election was based on development. People saying, the city's getting overdeveloped, we're losing nice character housing and seeing, 6 apartments go up, and so the platform wasn't about roadworks or parks or anything that you might. It was all about development, and it got quite heated between the mayor, if you like, the incumbent mayor, and the would-be, if he could be mayor, and the other all those councillors out there, fighting for their seats, and so it became so personal. I had a project going through for 14 1-bedders, and the assessment manager at council approved it because it conformed with everything. The mayor got wind of it and vetoed it. So we got a situation of the mayor and a couple of elected members on the development committee overruling their own council town planning department and saying, no, you can't approve it. And they say, but it totally conforms. And they, like typical, they're saying, well, I don't care, let them fight it in court. That's the attitude because they're not using their money. Anyway, it became quite heated. And I even had the mayor at the time rang up my architect and abused him. Anyway, in the end, we came to a slight compromise. The compromise was still in my favour, I feel, and a little bit of a compromise to them. But there's a situation of the actual mayor and councillors going against their professional full-term town planning department.
Wow.
The weird thing is that when they were going to knock it back, I said, okay, I'll see you in court. And so they did knock it back. The assessment, this is a good little story, the assessment manager at council left after that. I don't think because of that, but he was quite experienced in council. He then took up a position in one of the big town planning engineering firms. I found out about that immediately. I then went and engaged him because it looked like we're going to court. And so I engaged him as my town planner to go to court because he had all the inside knowledge on everything that had happened at council. And now he'd left council. And so when that became known, council backed down and we came to a compromise and never went to court. And it was okay,
So many stories. But,
funny old story, that one.
Oh, it is a funny old story. And I think what we can take away from today is the rules don't always apply. The rules can change. Not every change will end up negative. Some of them will be, you might think it's a bad situation right now, and like with the current mentoring students, having that change, it'll actually end up being better for them. Yeah. There's a lot of little lessons in there.
Yeah, I guess we're saying council, it's just not a black and white thing.
No, there are a lot of grey areas, but I think a lot of useful information. Thank you, Bob, for sharing your amazing stories as usual. And there you go, everybody. The effect that the council can have on your property development, good and bad. Wise words of wisdom from our man, Mr. Bob Andersen.
Oh, yeah.
And remember to just check out, subscribe to us on YouTube so you know when our podcast is out, or on Apple. And episode 41, the last episode, was really popular, so you might want to jump in and have a listen for some reason. Otherwise, we will catch you next week, and we hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Bye.
Bye.